Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive, and today we're going to continue our look through Warhammer Quest and the base game. And we're going to look at the two books that we haven't looked at yet, starting with the adventure book here. And let's take a real kind of a brief look at this one here. So this is the book that dictated the missions or the quests that you would go on. And like I said in the first book, you would, or in the first video, you would draw one of the cards that represents the objective room. And then once you find the objective room that you were going to be looking for, you would come to this adventure book here. And from the adventure book, you would then roll a d6, and that would dictate what quest you were on. So for example, if you drew the card for the fighting pit, and then you rolled a 1, you would come here and you would look at the quest. And it has a little bit of flavor text for the fighting pit. The dim light of a single lamp suspended from the ceiling barely penetrates the shadows of this dark and forbidding room. And then if you were to do the beast quest, captured by the goblin warlord Urgrel Headsticka, while exploring the ruins of Karak Osgal, the warriors have been given a chance to escape, and in the process provide entertainment for the goblins. The warriors must fight their way to freedom without weapons or armor. And as if that were not enough, their only way is through the Minotaur's lair. So then you would usually get some special rules after the flavor text. So in this case, the warriors start this dungeon stripped of any armor and weapons they may have and must fight with their bare hands. Okay, so like while they have no armor, they are without armor, and the warriors may only deduct their toughness from any blows. So you don't get the bonus from armor starting this adventure. And then no weapons. The warriors start with no weapons at all, even missile weapons, and must therefore fight in hand-to-hand combat using their fists. While fighting unarmed, each warrior does 1d6 wounds when it hits, with no modifiers for strength. And then finally, it would tell you maybe some special events that would happen. When the first monster event card is triggered, the warriors notice that their assailants are carrying but not using their weapons. If the warriors kill these monsters, they may retrieve their weapons. When the second event card reveals monsters is triggered, the warriors see that their assailants are guarding their armor. If the warriors kill all of these monsters, they may retrieve their armor. So you get your armor and weapons pretty quickly, but it does add a little bit of flavor to the quest. And then once you find the fighting pit, you would do this. When the warriors reach the objective room, do not roll on the objective room monster table. So the base game came with this standard objective room monster table, and we'll go over monster tables a little bit later. But this would dictate what you would fight and face once you finally reach the objective room. But a lot of objective rooms and a lot of quests had their own unique aspect to this. So the only way for the warriors to escape the dungeon is through the trap door at the bottom of the fighting pit. However, the fighting pit has a powerful curse laid upon it, and for every warrior, up to a total of 3 who jumps into the pit, a Minotaur appears next to him and will fight him to the death. As soon as the warrior is placed in one of the fighting pit squares, place a Minotaur model in the adjacent square in that pit. The Minotaurs will attack in the monster's phase as normal. See the rulebook for the Minotaur's profile. So yeah, so that's pretty rough. I mean, you could have 4 low-level characters jumping into this pit and then have to face off against 3 Minotaurs. So that could easily lead to a total party wipe there. This game is very deadly. I can't remember if I said last time, but the last time I played the game, I usually play with 2 characters. I usually play with a wizard and a warrior. I'm going to be mixing it up a bit for when we do start our playthroughs here. But the first time I've played last time, both of my heroes died in the first tile of the dungeon. Silly me. So long story short, I forgot to bring a rope with me, and one of the first event cards I drew was a pit. Both of my warriors fell down into the pit, and without a rope, there's no way to escape. So they both starved to death and died in the dungeon. It's that kind of game. Life is cheap, and I never even bother naming my warriors until they get to at least level 2 or maybe even 3 sometimes. But yeah, each of these quests has a little bit of flavor text and then some cool special rules. I wouldn't say there's a ton of variety to the standard quests, but there's enough to make it interesting. I'd say there's There's probably more variety in the quests here, or maybe about the same, amount as in the the standard quest books from Shadows of Brimstone, which Shadows of Brimstone is basically a rethemed Warhammer quest. It's very, very similar. So it looks like that's a Minotaur there. Some kind of giant spider. Destroy the Warpstone icon. Banish the demon. Destroy the bridge. Preserve the fires, the fire chasm. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some special things to do, special rules here. So this was in the Fountain of Light. The quest was Clearwater. Special rules. Nominate one of the warriors to carry the cask of beer. Oh yeah, so this one you have to carry a cask of, I think it's, what is it, the Bugman's XXXXX Super Brew. So one of the warriors has to carry the cask of beer. The chosen warrior's movement is reduced by 1 square while carrying it. There is plenty of beer in the barrel, and if they wish, each warrior can drink from it. If each warrior drinks from it more than once, however, there will not be enough left to activate the fountain. Any warrior who drinks from the barrel must roll a die. So if you roll a 1 or 2, the warrior falls senseless to the floor for the rest of the turn, and everyone in the room thinks him dead. However, at the start of the next turn, he awakens, healed by 1d6 wounds, albeit with a very sore head. And if you roll a 6, the brew courses through the warrior's veins, restoring him to full wounds. So yeah, it adds there's some nice variety to the quests. And there's a lot of them, 30 quests in the base book. That could keep you busy for a long time. I mean, if you die or a quest can be over very quickly, you can try again. A successful quest could take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. So with just the base book, you're looking at quite a bit of gameplay. And then at the back of the book, they also threw in a rule, and it's kind of weird that it's in the back of this book. That's always been kind of a weird thing, is that for escaping, when you want to escape a dungeon, you have to go to the back of this book. And so if your warriors takes flight and tries to escape from the dungeon, roll 2d6, and then it kind of determines whether or not you escape. And you kind of follow a little path there. But sometimes you have to escape because the ways behind you close off, the portcullises close, and you're stuck, and so you have to search for a secret door to get out. I've had plenty of games end where there was no way to get out. And then it also has a little bit of creating your own event cards, and some event cards that you can photocopy, and you can do non-combat encounters and combat encounters. And then finally, another to hit chart, a little character adventure chart sheet that you can print off, and a brief rules overview. So that's the adventure book. But the real draw of the game, the thing that makes Warhammer Quest special, the thing that kind of, I think, elevates it above all other dungeon crawls is this roleplay book. This thing is almost 200 pages. So imagine, like, Shadows of Brimstone or Descent coming with a book that was 200 pages of kind of optional rules. And maybe you could say in a modular fashion where you can kind of pick and choose what you want to use, when you want to use it. You don't have to use everything all the time. But if you like certain things from this book, you could easily incorporate them into your games of Warhammer Quest. And it changes the game from a pretty standard dungeon dive into something that is almost a role-playing game, or at least a role-playing roguelike RPG experience. There is some stat checks. There are rules for GMing. There are rules for the bestiary in here is just awesome. Probably my favorite part of the book. And also has some nice painting examples here. So you could look at it and get sad that yours would never look that good. But this book, I love this book. It's one of my favorite role-playing books. even though it's not deep, it's not a great role-playing system, it just adds so much, and there's so much character and personality in this book. It's got a nice preview of the Warhammer world with a map of the old world and where you would be adventuring. And then the first section here is all about linking games, and it gives you rules and things for your characters to do when they're not dungeon diving. And even today, a lot of dungeon crawl games don't have this aspect where the characters have these lives outside of their adventures. And it tells you how to keep your warriors from game to game, you know, what they can do. And then you also have to travel to and from the dungeons, just like you do in Shadows of Brimstone. So like I've said, Shadows of Brimstone is pretty much a carbon copy of this game. And so in this game, you can choose your destination, just like in Shadows of Brimstone. You can go to a village, town, or city. And the village is the smallest, the city is the biggest, and depending on, you know, which one you choose, it takes a longer time to get there, and then you have to roll on the hazards table. And most of the rolls in this book are D66, which is kind of like a percentile dice, but you take two D6s and you roll two of them. I'll take this yellow one here. So you say like the yellow one is the 10s, so you would go to 46. So then you would look up entry number 46, and that would give you your little flavor of what happened to you while you were traveling. So in this case, let's see here, it was an ambush. As the warriors travel through a particularly dark glade in a gloomy forest, they are ambushed by forest goblins, riding giant spiders leaping from the shadows. They threaten to overwhelm the hardy warriors by sheer weight of numbers. Roll a d6 for each warrior on the following table. So then you would roll a d6 to find your fate. I rolled a 3. Knocked out by a sneaky blow from behind, your warrior awakes to find one item or equipment stolen, determined randomly. So a lot of the things that can happen to you in between your adventures are bad. You can die while you're not in a dungeon. And then sometimes good things happen. And when you finally reach your settlement, there are a number of different locations you can go to, and each location has special things. And then in addition to that, with the locations in this book, each expansion character comes with a little book that also has a special location that only that character can go to. So depending on which warriors you're playing, in between dungeons, you're going to see different kinds of settlements. And in the settlement, the warriors have to, stay at inns. They have to have money for living. You can go to different, like an alchemist laboratory, an ale house. And like, the ale house has an events table that certain things can happen in the ale house. You can get in a brawl and all that kind of stuff. You can go to a guild master and have runes equipped on your weapons. There's an elf quarter that has different things for elves to buy. There's temples temples of Sigmar where you can get healed and have like different kind of curses lifted. The Wizards Guild is where the wizard goes to learn new spells. And then on top of that, every day you have a settlement event, and you roll the same thing. You roll a d66, so that would be 14. Okay, and then you check your settlement event good deed. Leaving most of his gold carefully stashed away in his hotel, your warrior goes out on the town, taking 1d6 times 20 gold with him. As he crosses the street, he spots an old crone in an upstairs window, shouting that robbers have broken into her attic room and are stealing her few possessions. Happy to assist the helpless, he bounds up the rickety stairs to her room, 3 at a time. As he enters her dimly lit room, a black bag is placed over his head, swiftly followed by a heavy iron bar. He awakens in the gutter several hours later, nursing his sore head. Not surprisingly, the gold he was carrying is all gone. So again, something bad happens. I swear to you, there are good things too that can happen. But there are catastrophic events. So like sometimes you might roll on this catastrophic event and roll a d6 for each warrior. The warrior with the lowest score decides to settle down here. His adventuring career is over. So yeah, your warriors can actually like go and retire in these settlements. Now a lot of it is random, so you are just rolling random tables, but it's easy to use your imagination to link the events together. And I love random tables. I love rolling on random tables. And because I like to connect the dots in my mind about what's happening to my characters. But then there's also, there's armorers and fletchers. You can buy arrows and armor. You can buy different animals, mules, horses, different weapons you can buy. You can sell all of your treasure. So there's a lot to do. There's not as much to do in the base game as there is, say, in the Frontier Town expansion of Shadows of Brimstone, but there is definitely enough. And then you start getting into the ways to make the dungeons more interesting. So tougher monsters, and this starts going through how to give the monsters maybe a bit more personality by adding some psychology to where the monsters can generate fear and terror, and just different ways to add a little bit more of a tactical feel to the combat. Okay, and then you have the warriors development. So this is how you start upgrading your warriors. Gold and experience are the same thing in this game. So gold is used not only to buy weapons, but it's also used to upgrade your character because they have to pay for training. So as you get training, each warrior has a certain training aspect, and there's a new stat called luck, and luck lets you re-roll dice. So as you go up in levels, you get more luck. And then this is the charts here that tell you the stats. So when you level up, it costs a certain amount of gold. You get a title. Then all of your stats increase, and you also learn skills. And each warrior has a number of skills that you determine randomly again. It's a D12 roll. So if I was the barbarian going up to level, let's say 2 or 3, I would get skill number 4, Battle Rage. So consuming rage overcomes you and you go completely berserk, slashing and hacking at your foe. The skill gives your warrior either +1 attack per level, or +1 to hit per level, or +2 strength per level for 1 turn. Choose which characteristic is affected before the turn begins. This skill may be used once per dungeon. And there are a number of different, and each time you roll one of these, you get it, you write it on your character sheet, and the next time you level up, you roll for another one. But the most interesting character to level up in the base game is the wizard, because the wizard has to learn new spells. And there are really a great number of spells in this game. So here's a list of all the spells dictated by level. And each of the spells has an entry. And it really is kind of as complex of a spell list, really, as something like basic Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. And some of the spells get really interesting. They add a bit more utility, a bit more things for the wizard to do to help the party out or to hinder the enemies. And then there's also, so as we mentioned before, there in the dungeons, there are non-combat events and monster events. Well, there's a deck of cards for events, but then you can also come here and it has an expanded table where you could roll for certain events. So again, it's a D66 roll, so 11, a cave-in. So that causes a block in the passage. So there's a lot of ways in this book to just expand your game. There's all kinds of new treasure. So I'll show you the huge stack of treasure cards that the game comes with if you get all the expansions. But then you also have this whole listing here of all of this dungeon room treasure. So again, if you don't want to draw a card, you can just come in here and roll to get things like a biting blade that can be used by the barbarian, dwarf, elf, and wizard. Okay, so this sword has been magically sharpened to a razor-fine edge and is capable of biting through sheet steel as if it were paper. While your warrior is using this sword, each attack he makes ignores the first point of the opponent's armor. So yeah, that's pretty great. There are magic items. There's so much in this book. Then you get to the really great treasure, the objective room treasure. So this is when you solve one of your quests. you can either draw one of the objective room cards, or you can come to this book here and roll up and maybe get the Hammer of Sigmar, or the Blade of Leaping Gold, the Talisman of Obsidian, the Tablet of Adain, the Armor of Takan. Yeah, all kinds of neat stuff. And then we get to the best part, is the bestiary here. This game has so many great monsters that you can use, that you can fight. So much more than most any other dungeon crawl. So this book, I mean, just look at this list here. From here, you've got monsters. So you have all different kinds, or these are the special abilities. Each monster can have a number of abilities. And then you get to the list. So you have your Chaos Beastmen, Chaos Warriors, Chaos Sorcerers, Juggernauts, Bloodthirsters, Demons of Slaanesh, Demonettes, Fiends of Slaanesh, Nurglings, the Great Unclean One, the Horrors of Tzeentch, the Flamers of Tzeentch, Lord of Change. And you have Chaos Dwarves, the Tall Hats, Dark Elves, a list of mythological monsters, Skaven, Orcs, Greenskins, Undead. So, like, there's probably, I don't know, 75 or so monsters to fight in this game. And each one, so here's a number of the special powers: their armor, their damage. They can be demonic, they can dodge, they can assassinate, they can be armed with certain weapons, breathe fire, they fight in ranks, which is like kind of with spears. They have different types of magic, so some monsters will have their own magic tables that they roll on. Ignore blows, hate, guards, gang up. They can have magic armor with different properties. Paralysis, petrify, plague, regenerate. They can have mystical tattoos that add abilities to them. They can have magic weapons where you roll on a table and the monster will have a different magic weapon or carrying a different magic item. Yeah, oh man, there's really so much stuff here. And then you just get into the listing of all the monsters. And so the Beastmen fight in war bands led by old savage warriors who have long since proved their ability to lead. They are powerful and very resilient fighters with big brutish heads, sharp piercing horns, and hooves that can kick in a man's rib cage. So then you have your stats here. So you have your Beastman Champion, your Beastman Hero, your Beastman Lord, your Shaman, and your Champs. Champs. And then if you have your Beastman Magic here, so if you're fighting a Beastman that has magic, when you're fighting it, you would roll on this table to see what spell it's casting. And same as your Chaos Sorcerers, your Demons of Khorne, Bloodthirsters, the Slaanesh. Oh yeah, look at that picture. That is fantastic. Chaos Dwarves. Man, I wish Chaos Dwarves minis weren't so hard to find. They're always so expensive because they're out of print and they haven't redone them. Dark Elves. And you have your Giants. So Giants have different attacks. So you roll on this attack chart to see what a Giant does when it hits you. And then you have all of your great monsters: Centaurs, Cave Squigs, Chimeras, Dragon Ogres, Cockatrices, Centaurs, Dragons with their own dragon hordes that you roll on to see what kind of treasure the dragon is guarding. Giant rats, giant bats, giant scorpions, spiders, Tauruses, Gorgons. I mean, I don't know of any other dungeon crawl that just has this many options of monsters to fight. And these games, they live and die by their variety. And so this book adds a ton of variety to the game, making it almost nearly an endless experience. All the different Skaven clans, each one with different weapons and powers. The Plague Bearers, the Storm Vermin, or the Plague Monks, Poison Globadiers. And then, of course, you get to your Undead. And then here is an example of a monster table. So if you want to use the expanded monsters, You determine your level of the dungeon, which is basically like kind of like the average. I think it's the average of your player party, or it might be the level of your highest level warrior. And then anytime you draw a card that has a monster, instead of doing what the card says, you come to your tables and then you roll a d66. So in this case, I would roll a 36. Now I would come here and see what it says. So 36. I would fight 1 to 3, so a d6 divided by 2 wild cave squigs. Oh no, this would mean that you roll a die, you roll another dice. So I roll a 5. So 5 to 6, you're fighting a trained cave squigs and goblin squig hunters. And this gives you your stats, how much gold they're worth, what kind of special powers they have, and special rules. So never pinned and herd squigs. And there are 10 different tables. So you have level 1, 2, 3, level 4, level 5, and as you can see the levels get really big. So like the level 5 is 2 pages full of just different monsters you can fight. So it does add some time and some bookkeeping, but that's the trade-off, you know, for near endless variety. I've never even, I mean, the highest I've gotten a warrior up to is like level 4 or 5, so I've never even seen any of these like level 10 stuff here. And then you get into the section that makes this game more like an RPG. You get to a games master section. So this is basically a dungeon master that can play. So you can have 4 players playing warriors and 1 player as the dungeon master, making this game even more similar to the original Hero Quest or Advanced Hero Quest with the dungeon master. And so this adds ways to do non-player character interactions and ways for the dungeon master to control the dungeons, to write his or her own dungeons and monster tables. Ways to control the traveling and how to handle things in town. Secret doors and traps in the dungeon. You know, character encounters where the warriors can meet different characters and have non-combat interactions. Then you get into a little background of like what is role playing, because you know you got to think of this game was a board game, maybe being sold more to board gamers or miniatures gamers rather than RPGers. So I don't know if, I'm sure there was some crossover, but this gave it just a nice little background on what kind of stuff to expect if you wanted to make your game more into a role-playing game. And then also added a new characteristic to upgrade, which was willpower. And it added a whole bunch of different actions you could take. So there was this chart here that would give you a listing of kind of like RPG actions, like barging aside, climbing a wall, disarming an enemy, fight defensively, hiding, jumping, leaping over, loosen ties and bonds, difficult shot. So these are all things that you could do, and it would give you a test to test your strength or your initiative, your weapon skill, and then it would give you a breakdown of the character, the way you would bonuses or penalties to that strength, to that roll, and then you would roll your dice and see if you could test. So if you could pass the test. And so this gave you, you know, stat checks in the game for a whole bunch of different things that you could do. Now, the only problem is that all of the dice rolls in this game are D6. So you don't get, there's not a large variety or a large spread of numbers. And so everything is kind of, it's a more of a narrow focus test, which it kind of, well, I wish they would have kept the D12 system from Advanced Hero Quest, because I like the D12 better than the D6. It just gives you a larger spread of numbers to work with. But that being said, this is still really cool. And what I do is I will use this chart here, even in a single player game, to add some narrative elements to my solo games. So if I was in a dungeon and let's say I wanted to start a fire, and I could come down here and I could find out what I would need to do to start a fire, and I could roll, and then if I started the fire or not, then I could role play a little bit, or at least make up some cool narrative elements in my single player games without the need of a dungeon master. So that just adds so much. And like I said, these are all kind of modular in fashion. So you can pick and choose which ones you want to use in either your any of your games. Then it also added a 5th warrior type in the book, an expansion character, the Troll Slayer. A lot of people think this is maybe one of the worst characters, either the Troll Slayer or the Warrior Priest. These guys are just all about getting treasure, and they will. I think these are the ones that they will never run from a dungeon. So it's easy to lose these guys, and all they want to do is get treasure. This has a whole section for the Troll Slayer, and then it has a whole adventure here for the Dungeon Master to run called the Death Below Karak Osgal. And this adventure actually directly leads into the first expansion, the Orc expansion. And so it comes with your dungeon setup, and so the heroes would start here, and as they moved, as the dungeon master, you would put down the tiles that they could see. But of course you wouldn't tell them where the secret doors were or where the secret traps were. And then each room had a number, just like an old Dungeons and Dragons module where you would read and tell the warriors what they would do, and they would have to do different stat checks to get through traps and to disarm traps, to jump through or to jump pits and open secret doors. And so yeah, it adds a lot. So it adds, the adventure in this book is 3 levels. They call them deeps, so it goes from deep 1 to deep 3. So yeah, that's it. That's the book there. And then you have a more an advanced character sheet, which you could have your skills or your stats, and then some more examples of how your miniatures will never look, or I should say how my miniatures will never look. So yeah, that's it. That's about everything we're going to cover in the base game. This roleplay book, I love it. It just adds so much fun to the game, and there's so many different ways to add variety and a nearly just endless amount of interaction with the game. Much more interaction than just about any other board game RPG that I know of, except maybe Shadows of Brimstone. Shadows of Brimstone is right up there. And the upcoming game Darklight Memento Mori is also kind of just a reskinned Warhammer Quest. I'll show you that when I get it. Even some of the tiles, especially the objective room tiles, look like they are straight up almost photocopied from Warhammer Quest. It's kind of silly, but that game looks awesome, and that's going to come with a ton of stuff. And that also has settlement events and all kinds of things for your warriors to do in between dungeon diving. So yeah, I think that's going to be it for this one. Next time we're going to start taking a look at the expansions. Probably we'll take a look at the 2 big box expansions. So we have the Catacombs of Terror, and then the Orc one, which embarrassingly the name is slipping me right now. I actually don't have the box for that one. I only have the box for this one here. So all right, well, I hope everybody has a good night, and we will see you next time. Bye bye.